We told you earlier this hour, breaking news, a car bomb exploding in Beirut today, killing a pro-Western politician and at least 5 others. That attack apparently targeting the former Lebanese minister and U.S. ambassador who opposed Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in their civil war that's playing out just next door. Joining me now is Stephen Yates, the Deputy Assistant to the Vice President for National Security Affairs from 2001 to 2005 and current CEO of DC International Advisory. Good to have you along today. First question for you, why did they kill this former U.S. ambassador in Lebanon?
I think it's part of a string of violence that's taken place in Lebanon. Unfortunately, a lot of the violence that has been coming across the region from Iran into Iraq and Syria and now spilling over to Lebanon has taken several of the leaders from the former Prime Minister Hariri in 2005 until now. There has been a protracted effort to try to knock out the anti-Shia Islamists in Lebanon. And so this pro-Western figure was part of a government that was pushing back on those Shia Islamists that have taken over Syria.
The civil war is playing out next door in Syria, yet our reporter Connor Powell told us this hour Lebanon is a dangerous mess. Why?
Well, it's got proximity, but also Iran has a decades-long relationship with Hezbollah, its terrorist vanguard. Hezbollah has conducted violent attacks in Lebanon and the broader region for some time. So it's really this arc of instability that comes from Tehran all the way to the Mediterranean that is guiding these events right now.
All right, sit tight. We're going to come right back to you. Leland?
Important stories ahead, including that every year hundreds of thousands of Americans have knee surgery. But now a new study warns that surgery may not actually be necessary. We're going to break it down with an orthopedic surgeon coming up.
All right, so we said we'd bring him back, and we will. Stephen Yates, the Deputy Assistant to the Vice President, National Security Affairs from 2001 to 2005, current CEO of DC International Advisory. We were talking with you previously about the situation in Lebanon with the bombing there, but I want to move on now to South Sudan because this has happened. Of course, just to remind everybody, Americans, our guys in Ospreys, trying to pull American citizens out over the weekend. They shot from the ground at our guys, and some of them got hurt in South Sudan as they were trying to take Americans out of harm's way as that country falls potentially toward civil war. So my question for you this morning is about the ceasefire that is just now hitting the Associated Press wires. South Sudan's government says that they will end hostilities. Can we trust that?
I don't think we can afford to trust it, although I think we have to look very, very carefully at this situation and decide what kind of a strategy the United States is going to have, because situations like this are very, very easy to get involved in and then have some sense of and events sort of take you in a direction you never intended. We have a lot of aid workers that are on the ground. I think this is a situation where we see a lot of tragic violence taking place. We're probably going to have to rely on regional allies and UN agencies to take the lead here.
You know, there were visions of Black Hawk Down, and people were talking about Rwanda and all sorts of things this weekend when our Ospreys were fired on, and we didn't know if Americans were going to make it out of an evacuation mission alive. What is it like there in South Sudan, and how involved do we get with putting people in there permanently? Are we going down that road?
I think it would be very, very cautious about putting UN forces on the ground in South Sudan. It is a tragic situation. There's no question about the humanitarian need that is there, but we have to be very careful about looking at the broader region. There's a lot of unstable states across northern Africa and eastern Africa. The United States needs to have some sense of what its priorities are and where and how it will use its resources, and in cases like this probably should rely on capable neighbors and others in the international community to fill a void here. Who
would be the capable neighbor in this case?
Well, you've got relatively major states like Ethiopia right nearby. That will be basically a basing ground for UN agencies and others to be able to intervene from. And we have the African Union and others we've relied upon in unstable situations ranging from eastern to western Africa in times past. So I think we have to come to terms with what resources and allies we're working with in the northern African tier before we can decide about the U.S. specifically in a place like South Sudan.
Stephen Yates, thank you so much for your perspective and your context on this morning. Leland?
Thank you, Harris.